So this was the movie that Christopher Nolan really wanted to be in theaters and to be seen by people in theaters during a pandemic. Huh. Hi everybody, my name is Charles and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, yes, my name is Charles and this is my channel. Today I will be talking about the recently released movie Tenet from Christopher Nolan starring John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Kenneth Branagh, and I think that's everyone who's really important. I know Aaron Taylor Johnson's in the movie, but he's barely in the movie, so really those four people are like the main stars of the movie. So what, like, Tenet was supposed to come out in, June, July of this year, but seeing as how there was a pandemic, they, kept pushing it back. I think they pushed it back to, August or, the end of July, and then, they released it at the end of August / start of September, and I was just like, okay, cool, Nolan, cool. I mean, I don't think that many people are going to be watching this movie in theaters since there's a pandemic and most theaters around the world are closed, but, go off. Looking at the budget for Tenet, it cost around $200 million to make this movie, not even adding the marketing into the movie, which probably cost maybe 100 or maybe even $200 million, seeing as how they had to re-advertise this movie a few months later. So it probably cost around $400 to maybe $500 million to make it. And I heard that was the break-even cost for them to be in the clear for this movie. And looking at how much the movie made worldwide, it's only $361.4 million. So clearly there was not enough people to help this movie, as it technically is a flop. The movie is a flop financially, but also it's a flop critically, seeing as how the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie is around 71% and the audience score is at 76. That's pretty low. And when I looked at Christopher Nolan's movies on Rotten Tomato, I'm like, wow. Tenet is the lowest of all Christopher Nolan's movies on Rotten Tomatoes at 71%. The next lowest would have to be I think The Prestige at 76%, and that movie is certified fresh. This one is not certified fresh, and I'm like, wow. The last movie from Christopher Nolan not to be certified fresh was his I think first movie, Following, and I'm like, that is probably too old to certify fresh, and maybe they could retroactively give it a certified fresh, but really I would say this is his real first movie to not be certified fresh. And I'm like, wow, that must hurt. I personally feel that this movie was released in the wrong time. I mean, we are in a pandemic, and as you can see, movie studios are pushing back all their major movies to 2021 to the middle or maybe even the end of 2021 for safekeeping, because they don't want any of their major projects to flop. And Christopher Nolan being this has to come out in theaters. And I'm just like, does it? And honestly, after watching the movie, I'm like, yes, watching this in a theater would have made the experience even better, but at the same time I'm like, the story was kind of confusing. But then again, I'm like, that probably would have drove people to go back to watch it again. It's also complex, to be honest, but I'm just like, this movie really should have just waited. But Christopher Nolan, he couldn't wait. But seeing as how Warner Brothers and HBO Max are releasing all their 2021 movies on HBO Max and in theaters at the same time, I guess there really was no waiting for Tenet to come out, so Christopher Nolan was just like, let's just roll the dice, and he rolled the dice, and it didn't pay off. Going into the movie itself, I would have to say that I did enjoy myself watching this movie, and I do think the movie is good, a bit confusing, and I don't think that the rules of the world, are very, hammered down, I feel like a lot of things were said in this movie, and I was like, so I don't know if we're supposed to base this on reality, but I'm kind of confused with how a lot of this started with the whole time travel stuff of it all. I was just like, whoa, okay, sure, Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is the one who wrote this movie. He is the sole writer of this movie, so I'm like, okay, I think he might have just gone a little too deep into your own mind with this one, Christopher Nolan. I mean, Inception is honestly, I think, his best movie, hands down for me. Inception is Christopher Nolan's best movie, and that movie, it's complicated with the time sequences and the layering of dreams, but after you've seen it, I think you only need to see it maybe twice to really understand what's going on in that movie. But this one, I'm like, huh, I don't understand how the whole inversion process happens in this movie, because when that scientist was showing John David Washington that gun and how to shoot with inverted bullets, I was like, wait, so how did these bullets work, because if they were inverted, that means like a past version or future version of John David Washington would have to have been there to shoot that gun and the bullets, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. But you know, as the movie kept going on, I was like, okay, this makes sense, but a lot of the stuff they were showing at the start, I was like, this doesn't make sense, even with the rules you've established. Seriously, I would say like the first third of this movie, it looks good and it's really well crafted, but it makes no sense when you try to think about it. But I would say like the last 2/3 of the movie, like pretty much stick the landing for me personally. I still have questions about like the whole story and like all that, but for the most part, I could follow along after the first third of the movie, and I was like, okay, yes, I am following along. The end of this movie, when they're on their last mission and there's like two teams and one of them's inverted and one of them's just going forward regularly through time, I was like, this is so cool, you guys. And I was like, this is like legit the only set piece in the movie that really mattered. I mean, that and at the very start of the movie with the opera scene, I'm just like, those are the only two set pieces of the movie that I felt like were really, really good and interesting. Everything else, from like the hand-to-hand combat that happens in the movie, or even like the plane crashing in the hangar, which we see in the trailer, or like the car chase that we see in the trailer as well, I'm like, those are just okay. And you would think that like a plane crashing into a hangar would be more interesting, but if you've seen the trailer, then you know, that's it. Like, it just crashes and that's it. But I don't know, the action set pieces in this movie felt very weak to me, especially coming off of Nolan's last movie, Dunkirk, which I do not like that movie, but I have to give props to the technical aspects of that movie because you can't clock the technical aspects of Dunkirk. The actors in this movie, from John David Washington to Robert Pattinson to Elizabeth Debicki, they were all great in this movie. John David Washington and Robert Pattinson are the ones who really get the most time in this movie, and they really shine. But, you know, I really wish there was more done with Elizabeth Debicki's character, especially since, like, for the most part of this movie, she's really in, like, this captive state, and she's really just there until, like, the last third when she actually has something to do. It was giving me a lot of Ingrid Bergman in Gaslight, where like for 2/3 of that movie, or for the majority of that movie, she's just like this helpless woman, and the last third she has her moment. And I was like, fine, that's like the 1940s, so it's fine. But we are in the year 2020, and why are we doing that to Elizabeth Debicki? Tall woman Elizabeth Debicki. She deserves better, you guys. She deserves better. And when it comes to Kenneth Branagh, ooh, Christopher Nolan has done him dirty. Kenneth Branagh was in Christopher Nolan's last movie, Dunkirk, and you know, he was pretty good in that movie. He was the only actor who I think did really well, but you know, I think Christopher Nolan just led him astray here, because Kenneth was just hamming it up in this movie, and Christopher Nolan just let him, and I'm like, Christopher didn't say anything, or none of the producers said anything, or not even any of the other cast members said anything, and I'm like, if I was there, I would have been like, yo, Kenneth, your performance is not on the level of Robert or John, and it's like you kind of looking like a kid's cartoon villain with your bad accent and like this very stilted like performance. In my opinion, it felt stale, the performance. It felt very like one note. It didn't feel like it was actually going anywhere, and I was like, Kenneth Branagh, who like studied like Laurence Olivier and his work, you could have done better. We've seen your like past stuff, Kenneth, and this is tragic that you're doing this when you've done so much great work in the past. Also, Aaron Taylor Johnson, the tragicness that like he was barely in this movie. There was a period of time in the early 2010s when everyone was like, Aaron Taylor Johnson on the rise, star on the rise, and look at him now. He's been a part of like Marvel. He's been a part of like that Kick-Ass series. He's done like Nocturnal Animals with Tom Ford, and he was so close to getting an Oscar nomination. So many things were going his way. Anna Karenina. Oh, he is so good in Anna Karenina and hot. But like, he had so many chances at stardom, and yet none of those moments really helped him bounce off into stardom. And look at him now. He's in the newest Christopher Nolan movie, and when people talk about this movie, they barely bring him up because he's barely in the movie, and you can't really tell that's him. So, this sucks. Do better by Aaron Taylor Johnson, Hollywood, please, because he is a good actor and he's a pretty good person from what I've heard, so please. Now, while I'm very kind of like lukewarm on the story, as I need it a little bit more explained to me, because it was very confusing that first third of the movie, and I really feel like what was going on in the first third of the movie wasn't really making sense, but what was going on in the last 2/3 made sense because it was happening like in real time, the inversion. But at the start I was like, so how far can we invert things? I was like, I don't understand. So the story, like when you actually really think about it, you can really process what's going on in the last 2/3 because it's like an event that's happening right in front of your face. But in the first third, when they're explaining inversion, I was like, so how far can we invert things and how far in time are these things moving? I was like, this is confusing. So like, I would like it explained a little bit more to me. But yeah, the story, it's kind of a mess, but it's fine. When it comes to Christopher Nolan's direction, it is once again impeccable. Like, I might not agree with some of the movies he's made, but his direction in all the movies I've seen from him are top-notch and very unclockable. So he did a good job there, but you know, I don't think we're gonna see no Oscar nominations for directing for him because this movie, I feel, and not the technical aspects. The technical aspects of this movie I feel like could slide into the Oscar race, but like for the most part I feel like this movie has no chance at Oscars. But like Christopher Nolan, if this movie was better received and did better, he probably could have maybe, just maybe, snatched an Oscar nomination for Best Director, but that ain't happening anymore. I really just think that if Christopher Nolan like took more time and actually wrote this movie better, did some better exposition in his movie, then this would have been like a better movie. I still like the movie a lot. It's just that it needed more explaining. I mean, the story is legit the weakest part of the movie. That and like Kenneth Branagh's acting in this movie, those are the only two things that I'm like, you guys needed some work. But everything else in this movie, I'm like, you guys are doing very, very well. Very well. From like the acting to the directing to all the other technical aspects of this movie, I was like, this is all good. It's just the story itself and Kenneth Branagh needed some fine tuning. So, those were my thoughts on Tenet. I mean, have you seen the movie? Did you go to theaters and did you see it in theaters? Or did you wait, like me, to see it on streaming? I actually borrowed this when it came out on Tuesday to, like, borrow. I borrowed it from Redbox. And then after I watched it, I was like, I like it enough to buy it. So then I bought it on 4K. So I was like, there we go. But, I mean, tell me where you watched it. I mean, I honestly had the chance to watch it in theaters when theaters here in Washington opened up for, like, a brief period of time. But I chose to watch Freaky instead, and I do not regret that decision at all. So yeah, tell me down below in the comments what you thought of Tenet, and you know, is it one of your favorite Christopher Nolan movies, or is it not? You know, tell me, I would like to know, because I like Tenet, but I can see why it has a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. Okay, you guys, thank you for coming to my channel and watching this video, and hey, if you like what you saw, then, you know, subscribe to my channel. I do movie reviews, I talk about Blu-rays, I do music reactions, and I talk about whatever else I want to talk about in the pop culture realm because, you know, it's my channel, I'm gonna do whatever I want. So, if any of that interests you, then, you know, subscribe. And, you know, until the next video, you guys, I will see you then. Yep, okay, bye.